Well, it is 7 o'clock, and we do have oh, there's one more. Yeah. All right, it's a few minutes after 7. Chair Johns is not here yet. Hopefully he's coming. So Vice Chair Downs, shall we call this to order? All right.
Thank you so much. We're calling to order this meeting of the Policing Commission of the City of Albany, March 21. Do we begin with the roll call or the land acknowledgement? All right.
Yeah, I'll call roll. Member Downs.
Here.
Member Dupuy.
Here.
Member Lee.
Here.
Member Johns is absent. Member Locke.
Here.
Member McQuaid.
Here.
Member Yu is also absent, hopefully coming soon.
Okay, thank you all so much. I do not recall where we are in the rotation of the land acknowledgement.
I did it last time.
You did it last time. Have you done it, Commissioner Locke? I remember you have, Commissioner Lee. So either you or me, I guess, Commissioner McQuaid. Do you want to do it, or if not, I'm glad to.
I'll do it.
Great, thank you.
Excuse me. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you, Commissioner McQuaid. So next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 15 meeting. We have a draft of minutes that was posted by staff. Thank you for your work in that. Have people had an opportunity to look over them? Are there any amendments or revisions? Right. If not, should we move ahead to a vote to approve? Or I guess I'll entertain a motion to,
So move.
okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay. Do you want me to call, or do you want to call, Luke?
I can call the,
Okay.
so Member Downs,
Yes.
Member Dupuy,
Yes.
Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Johns is absent, Member Locke,
Yes.
Member McQuaid,
Yes.
and Member Yu is absent.
Great. Third on our agenda is public comment. So for persons desiring to address the commission on social and economic justice items that are not on the agenda, please note that each speaker is limited to up to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits this advisory body's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, they are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. In person, we have two members of our community who I believe are here for a presentation, but that doesn't preclude you from a public comment. Okay, how about online?
There are a couple of people online, but no one raising their hands. We'll give them a few seconds. No public comments at this time.
Okay, not seeing any? Okay. Not seeing any public comments, then we will move on to the next part, which is staff and commission member announcements. Are there staff announcements?
Not at this time. So any commissioners have announcements? Oh,
I do, but I'll wait for the commission to go while I load up my computer.
Okay. I'll just continue for this item. How about that, while Chair John settles, and then I'll happily relinquish the gavel. Are there announcements from members of the commission? I have, it's not really an announcement, but I'll just, unless the staff thinks this would be better to wait toward the end. We did receive a email from a member of the public that I think went to all of us. So I did speak with that person. I can either do that as an announcement or save it to the end, whichever you think is more appropriate.
I think now was fine.
Okay.
Before you do that, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Did everybody else get the email?
Did you not, Commissioner McQuaid?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I got the email.
It says pc@albanyca.org, so it was not to me individually, so I did check that. It says PC and TC, which I think should be our listserv and the Traffic Commission listserv, but it sounds like we have some people either it didn't go to or got forced into spam.
Do we have an email address for this commission?
I did receive it. Let me share my screen.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Downs.
No, I'm glad you told me. I had no idea.
I know, I have totally
know that
hijacked
you
your
are-
agenda item, but
I know that you are a serious reader of emails from members of the public, in all sincerity. I mean that you always take that very seriously. So I was.
So I'm putting it up, and I know the words are a little small, but
So this is from, if you all can see, this is from a member of the public who lives not too far from Cornell Elementary, and wrote about her experience or her perception while being part of what's called the Cornell Walking School Bus, which is parents who kind of pick up kids as they walk together. And summarizing our conversation, which basically, reiterates, this. She repeated something I think, probably we've heard from others, concern about the, challenge getting motorists to slow down at the Talbot and Solano intersection. Something I, as a near resident of that, have witnessed, both at school time and not. And then her, her appreciation of officers staffing it on a day that the crossing guards weren't there. But but then another piece that she noted of seeing a biker pulled over not far away while there was this while this challenge of traffic enforcement remained. Primarily, when I talked to her, she didn't have a specific, ask. She just wanted to be heard, especially about the challenge of that intersection, which I think we all are, or not we all, but I certainly am aware of generally and also during school time. So that was the extent. I was just going to say that I had followed up with her. And it sounds like we do want to check our emails. So what do you think would be the best thing for members of the commission, for them to be checking their spam and reporting back to you if they really don't have it, or?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So this came in on March 1st, as you can see. So the commissioners can go back in the emails that are on the list and see if it just got routed to spam or something else, just so we know how to deal with that in the future. That would be helpful.
And just for reference, I received it, and do I remember Commissioner Lee received it?
Yeah, I received it, yeah.
And I know not Commissioner McQuaid, okay,
I received it.
okay.
So it's every other person.
So we're 3 and 3. Okay. All right. Does that give you enough to work with in terms of who you want to make sure you hear from?
Yeah.
And then, getting close to wrapping up this item, I think we have an announcement from the chief, and then I think we'll hear from the chief soon again in either item 5 or 6.
So if you want, I can address a little bit of the context for the email that you received. So we've been working with the school there for definitely the last few years, and some of the residents there who have concerns about the school drop-off. And so we actually had our patrol lieutenant, I believe, was out there the first day. She saw somebody with the principal, just kind of having a follow-up meeting, watching the inner workings of what goes on. At the beginning of the school year, we do try to increase our presence out there. We do try to have officers on motorcycles if we can, because they're a little bit more maneuverable and easier for us to get through and then other people to get through. And then as far as, we do try to do traffic enforcement. I know there was a concern about a bicyclist being stopped, but if bicyclists don't stop, they can injure people, they can get injured by a car. So it's a dual-edged sword. We also happened to that same day not only stop a bicyclist, but we stopped a car for running stop signs. So it's a lot of times, as we'll discuss a little bit later, perception of our job is very challenging. And so just to keep that in mind as you hear and see things, that a lot of times things get taken out of context or people aren't privy to all the information. So, and we'll continue to work with the school. And we're kind of, I've heard from people who don't like seeing the police cars there because people do slow down and it starts to create a little more of a backup. But then when we're not there, people are upset. So we're used to that, right? We're kind of in this no-win situation oftentimes. So just to kind of answer what's going on there, but we are engaged, we're aware of the concerns there and trying to work with them. We're trying to develop some programs. We've made some suggestions about maybe even getting parent volunteers to set up like a car line so kids pull up. Somebody's there to open the door, the kids get out, and the car keeps going. So we're trying to work on some creative solutions, but nothing is quick, as I told the neighbors. We're not going to be able to fix this overnight. It's been an issue since I've been here, and I've been here about 30 years now. So, but we'll try to improve it as best we can.
Thank you, Chief. If members of the commission have any follow-up? Is that appropriate for the announcement? We'll hear again from the chief on a future item, but on this particular item, does anyone have any questions for the chief? Here is not. Chair Johns, do you want to take the gavel? We're at number 5.
Actually, if we could stay on announcements really
Oh,
quick.
yeah, I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Yeah, no problem. And I may be a little out of line on this, and I'm happy to, if you want to see this done elsewhere, but normally questions that we'll try to address should officially come through Luke, and, that way we can prepare for them. But I am engaged in the commission. I know we've had some staffing issues, and I have had conflicts, so I can't be here, but I am paying attention to the meetings. So I wrote down some of the questions that seem to be high interest questions, so I wanted to address those now, if that's possible. Great. So I know there was a question about some of the training that we put our officers through and a concern that maybe some of the training may not be ideal for officers. The majority of our training is post-certified, and that's the state agency that certifies us. And so I would say probably 90% of what we send people to is a post-certified course, and that's what we look for. We do our research on it. If there's a vendor or a training you've heard something that concerned about, shoot me an email or shoot Luke an email, and I'll look into it. We do our due diligence, and sometimes there's only one person who does a training course, but training's really important to keep our people up to speed on things. And we do, let me be clear, we do training that is not post-certified at times, just because it's outside of post and it provides us with sometimes a better opportunity. Let's see, there was some question about our bulletin and trying to figure out what is officer-initiated activity. And on the bulletin, the majority of them, when it's officer-initiated activity, it says it on there. At the bottom, it will say officer-initiated activity. So that's on our bulletin on the website. There was a question about how long we retain complaints. If a complaint is unsustained, it's 5 years. And then if there's a sustained complaint, it's 15 years. The 15-year extension happened when SB 16 came into effect, which was like 21, 22. And then Commissioner Locke, you had asked about, there was a discussion about complaints, but you had asked about letters of commendation and whatnot, and I appreciate you recognizing that. Coincidentally, right after that meeting, we were actually holding our first department awards dinner since 2019. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't do it. But at that dinner, we issued 27 letters of commendation to our staff. Let's see. There was questions about our ACT team, our mental mobile crisis team. We are having some struggles, a little bit of struggles with them, with staffing. And so I don't have a lot to provide for you. We've had some really good results with them on some cases, but we've had some struggles having them fully staffed. So more to follow on that. As things stabilize a little more, I'll try to get them here for you to talk with them. There was a question about the difference between an unfounded finding for a complaint and a exonerated. So an unfounded finding is something that clearly didn't happen. So let's say, as an example, somebody files a complaint and says the officer used, he or she swore at me during the traffic stop. If we watch the video and it captures everything in the time when the person says it happened, and there was nothing ever said, then that would be unfounded. It clearly didn't happen. Or if, let's say, it wasn't our officer who was involved, that would be an unfounded. An exonerated is where the person complains about something and the action actually happened, but it was legal or within policy. So let's say somebody alleges we, unlawfully searched them. If we look at it and it's a completely lawful search, it would be exonerated. So does that kind of clear that up for you? And I think that was it for questions. And then I also wanted to kind of touch on going back to the perception and kind of the intent, at least my understanding of this commission, of helping build trust with the community and stopping misinformation. And I just kind of want to caution about talking about specific incidents or cases, because oftentimes not all the facts are known, and it's somebody's perception, and oftentimes we're limited on providing facts, so we can't fairly provide the context of what's really going on. And just as an example of what happened, was there was a discussion about a crime that happened to a business in our city. And it sounded like we had a lot of officers there. They maybe were a little apathetic and not necessarily trying to, just going to take the paper and be done with it. But that's not what actually happened. And I understand the perception, right? Because you have somebody who's, they're only seeing their side. And again, I have to be very limited because I can't talk about it because of an ongoing investigation. But the sequence of events, we actually had a sergeant who was down at the west end of town getting ready to do some traffic enforcement, noticed a vehicle traveling at a high rate of speed on Marin in the center two-way turn lane passing traffic. It was unsafe for him to go after that vehicle. A few minutes later, we get a call of this crime at the business. The vehicle description matches the one that he saw going by. And he's like, wow, that car's probably long gone. So he responds up to the business. Another officer on their way there sees a car matching this description at a gas station. So they go out, contact those people, turns out unrelated. Sergeant's up at the scene because he's the first one there. The car that the officers who saw the car at the gas station, they go up because they're going to take the report. There's 2 officers because one of them's on training. So they're up there talking and doing the handoff. So, and I think we've had this discussion before of one of my challenges is sometimes it's going to look like we have more officers on scene because we're trying to hire people and we have people in training. So just to kind of give a full context on those are the concerns I have. And I think if we're not putting the right message out about the work we're doing, it cannot help accomplish the goal of the commission. So, great.
Thank you.
Sure.
And possible to open again to the commissioners for questions or responses on any of that?
I guess I would say my only response is that I hear what you're saying about perception, and perception may not be reality, but perception is very important in terms of just the, how the community feels about their police department. And, if for that example, if they're, actually like going after the criminals and all that. So I don't know. Since I've been on this commission, actively looking for like more transparency. Or back in the olden days, there used to be in our journal paper, there used to be the police blog, and I know it's available online, but you have to go seek that information out. It used to be you could just open the paper and you could read every crime that happened on the 600 block of this happened, and it seemed at that time like there was more proactive communication of of the crimes as they happened and the outcome of them. Now it just sometimes seems things just sort of disappear. Like we had that major issue down at the auto place, the shooting, and that sort of just, it was a big thing and then no more words about it. So, and I understand that if it's an ongoing investigation, there's only so much you can say. I understand that, but I think something needs to be said, like to address it, just because the perception then is like it's just being swept under the rug, So, though you're limited in like the details you could give, I don't know, it would just feel good to, as a community member, to have more communication, proactive communication.
Yeah, and my point of just saying is I kind of throwing that out as caution of what gets discussed, right? Of bringing things out, and if there are things you're interested in, maybe it's going through Luke, and then we can explain, hey, we can't talk about it. We're still, the Toyota is still under investigation, right? Despite the outcome, that is still being investigated because we have things we have to follow up on. So, and that's the challenge in our job, is that we are limited on what we can say, in particular in public. And so it's one of those things that hopefully we build the trust of the majority of people, that they say, I understand what's going on and I have to wait. And we understand, I fully understand people want information, but sometimes we just can't do it because we don't want to jeopardize whatever investigation we may have going. So again, I'm just kind of throwing that out as a caution of saying specific, when you get down to talking about specific incidents, there's a lot. Perception is people's realities, and I do understand that, and we understand that, and we try to do our best not to. I remember the blotter. That was, we used to have the lady come into the lobby and go through it, and it's different. Online is just kind of where things have gone, and it is. I mean, I think it's fairly easy to go, and it's a little more interactive with the heat map. So it's just kind of unfortunately where, kind of the things have changed and we've moved over to that electronic format.
Other questions or comments? I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I appreciate your inability to sometimes respond to specifics. But I think that it's also helpful sometimes to just be able to ask a question that may not be able to be answered in kind of real time. You know, having someone representing the department just sort of close at hand at a meeting seems to me to be indicative of a closer kind of working relationship, if you know what I mean. It's much easier to have a conversation with somebody if they're sitting here and I can look at them or we can look at them, as opposed to having to ask Luke to transmit a question which then may be answered at the next meeting.
Sure. And I understand that.
Okay.
But I also understand my staffing limitations, and, you know, we can do what we can, but I can't guarantee somebody to be here at every meeting.
All right.
I will just throw it out as an example. I've been here since 6:30 this morning. He's been here since 6 o'clock. And that's a regular basis for us. And so we get pulled in different directions, not only operationally here, but family life as well. And so we try to balance that out. So and my patrol staff we're running shorthanded now too. So I understand, but I also going to be honest with you, I just can't guarantee somebody to be here at every meeting.
Okay, and does it have any relevance that we're meeting like once a month?
Well, it does impact, because if you're having a meeting every month, that's every month that it would have to have somebody be here. So it increases the frequency and strain on the staffing.
Okay, well, maybe we can think together more about that.
I'm happy to talk with you about it afterwards.
Would there be an interval that you would feel comfortable committing to, like once a quarter or every other meeting or something like that?
I would have to give it some thought to it and really look at it.
All right.
So it's our job is very dynamic and it changes, so it's a little hard to, but I'm sure we could probably talk offline and figure something out that's hopefully amicable. And part of it is having the right person here, right? If I send a patrol officer, they may not know exactly what you're talking about, right? They would not know the inner workings of that email if that came up, or they may not know some of the projects we're working on or things like that. So it's wanting to make sure somebody's here so that conversation is worthwhile.
Can I ask a different question? I appreciate your, updates and your following our discussions. Just because I would imagine that not all of us will have it at hand, could you just explain post-certified, which I think on your first, which was a question about training that came up, which I appreciate, but I think it'll help if all of us know in layperson's terms.
POST stands for Police Officer Standards and Training. It's a state-run organization, and they certify all the training we do. They oversee the requirements for us hiring people. They now are responsible for if there's an officer's committed an egregious act, they decertify them now. So they're basically, in a sense, taking away their license that hadn't existed. So it's a state-run organization. We get audited by them. They come in, look at our hiring process, our backgrounds. They look at our training. They set standards for how often we have to have training. We have like continual professional training and then perishable skill training. That's all broken down, and it's 24 hours of CPT, and that's every 2 years? Every 2 years, and PSP is? Okay. And that's perishable skills. PSP is perishable skills. So that would be like, our defensive tactics, handcuffing techniques, going to the range, baton training, things like that. So, and then the continuing education ones are like tactical communication, bias-based policing, prevention, hate crime, things of that nature. So that is a state organization that monitors us.
So when you say perishable skills, is that something that you need to be recertified on every?
Yeah, so we go through that. It's again, it's like our handcuffing techniques, our control holds, going to the range, and we qualify. The range we qualify, like defensive tactics and handcuffing. There's not like an official test, but your instructor's watching you, making sure you're doing it correctly.
And do we need to take public comment, or are we at the close of number 4?
We do need to take public comment. Still no one in the room other than a fellow police officer. And looking online, I'm not seeing any hands go up. Give them a second. And I think we can move on.
Right, I think that concludes agenda item 4. Chair Johns, do you want to take us up at agenda item 5?
Not really, but
It's up to you. I did not want to usurp the gavel.
you can usurp to your consent.
All right, I think item 5 is informational report on the police department monthly dashboard.
Great. So you have that in front of you. So we had the property crimes. You'll see there was a slight increase in those this year. We had a little bit of burglary activity on the south side of our city that drove some of those numbers. Our violent crime was down. We had fewer assaults. And then our report totals went up, and that was primarily driven by collisions. We didn't have any other, I would say, standout crime trends. And I will tell you, we didn't have how I get a lot of our information, not only just by my regular searching of cases every day when I come in, but we have a staff meeting usually every month, and we weren't able to have that this month. And then our detectives usually kind of give an overall view of what kind of drove crime for the month, or what is driving crime. So I kind of have a generic answer for you of knowing of what kind of went on to drive these numbers.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Comments or questions from the commission? I think that one thing has come up is just thinking about how to present the data. We do have prior month's data and prior meeting agendas, but I think I remain interested in ways of making it more user-friendly as we build up a bigger backlog that within reason and within the limits of graphic presentation, which I know can, we don't want to have agate type, especially for those of us who are middle-aged, or what my kids say is optimistically middle-aged. But I think showing, say the prior month, while we've got that, or if there are, issues that you think that would become over time better understood seasonally, then, as we develop a bigger backlog showing the same month for the prior year, would I think just give us a little bit easier comparison data than year to date. It's fairly easy with February, divide by 2, but we'll be testing our math skills soon enough.
Sure. So if we were to put like the 2 months on there, does that help?
Yeah, so like if this one said January 24, February 24,
Okay.
What does the commission think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we even talked last meeting about having a sort of rolling, maybe a rolling 3-month period, where new month, the 4th month ago falls off, so we can see trends. I can't remember which 2 months I was looking at, but it was for violent crimes, it was the number was 3 1 month and then 7 that month. And now, granted, we're talking about single digits. It's not like a huge and gigantic number,
Right.
but that is more than twice what it was the month before. So, is that something we need to be alarmed about? Is that an anomaly? I was thinking, you know, violent crimes could include things such as domestic violence, or they could be stranger assaults, you know, and that's a big difference, you know, if it's something that's happening domestically versus, you know, walking down the street and you're being assaulted. So I don't know if there's a way to break, I'm not trying to make more work for you guys. I know you have a ton. But just for our purposes of being commissioners and doing our due diligence, you know, knowing what we're looking at and being able to look at this data and make sense of it and, you know, make good recommendations would be helpful.
Sure.
I think what we could do to help, instead of having the column and having the staff remake the report, is perhaps for the meeting, we can
Attach the prior month. So like, for example, this one, we can attach the prior month, just so that you can see. And you can also go to our website and find the prior month agenda, as we discussed before. But that way, the police staff does not have to revamp this table again.
And if there's something that is a trend or like that really jumps out of, in particular crime, I will tell you when it comes to like tickets, if there's a big fluctuation, that could vary from all different reasons. You know, we have people on training now, so they have to learn how to write tickets. So those numbers could go up and then they could dip down. They could dip down because the weather gets bad and it's not safe really making a lot of traffic stops when it's raining. But if there is, I see like a crime trend or something you should be aware of, I can't 100% guarantee, but I will do my best to make sure that information's put in that. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
And I wonder, thank you, Chief, and I wonder in response to Commissioner Dupuy's prior point, if just a definition, you know, including at the bottom you know, your definition of what goes in violent crime, would that be helpful, just to say violent crime includes reports of,
So I had that memo that,
Yeah.
that broke everything down.
yeah.
Do you want me to redo it and we'll just attach it the next time? I mean, it's literally, I'll work on that and we'll attach it so you have it as a regular reference. How does that sound?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Further comments or questions on the dashboard?
I just wanted to go back to the chair's comments on availability and accessibility of your staff, Chief, as well as your comments about Commissioner Dupuy about having sort of a rolling total or a way to contextualize the data. I think where I find the value in both those things are not so much in this commission producing some sort of statistical analysis or extrapolating data as lay people, right? I think that may be outside the scope of the intents of this commission. But where I do see value is to further contextualize that data and tell those stories, much like you did today, Chief, in regards to that email that was circulated to at least some members of the commission and explaining that, you know, these competing priorities and how what may work for some members of the community is perceived as being unhelpful to others. And I think further conversations like that on a variety of issues, I think is where we can do a lot of good in terms of opening up channels of communication and clarifying exactly what's going on both ways. So I think that if we can find a way to do that, then our time here will be better spent.
And I know I'm an older person, so I'm not super tech savvy, but I would encourage people to look at our crime map, because you can contextualize things down by the day, the month. They have the heat map that will really help you get a perspective of what's going on in those trends. So it is, and we have some people who love that and other people who don't. Again, it's kind of that catch-22 for us. But anyway, that just kind of want to remind you that that is a resource out there for people to look at to see what's going on in our community.
Are you looking to come in, Commissioner Dupuy?
I was just going to say, and I know that that's available. I don't know how many people in our town know that that's available. I mean, I know that if you go search the website, you can find it. But I know, like, for instance, I live along the BART tracks, and I've lived there for 20 years. We've had rashes of, smash and grabs, auto break-ins all along the BART tracks because it's a thoroughfare from El Cerrito to Berkeley, and they can get in and get out really fast. We've also had, rashes of, what's the piece of the car that they're always stealing?
Catalytic converters?
Yeah, catalytic converters. I had like 3 neighbors in 1 week have theirs stolen. And you talked about like making note of trends like that. And I know the heat map is available for people to go proactively look at that, but it would be nice if at least us as a commission, were aware of those kinds of trends. And you said you were going to kind of try to make a note of that if you could. So I think that would be helpful.
We also just, like when we do see some of the crime trends, I'm sure you've seen it, we send out community notifications. And as you're talking about this, what I'm wondering is maybe when we send those notifications out, maybe we should have a standard blurb at the bottom of the notification that says something about our crime graphics that you can go to, right? For, just kind of it's regular on there. Sometimes having a regular thing, it becomes, just noise and they don't pay attention to it. But would that be something helpful to kind of let people know that our website exists?
Yeah, I
That's a
think
way
so.
to-
And those notifications you're speaking about, do people have to opt into them? Say like, you know what I mean? Like,
They do, yeah. You go to if I get this wrong, Ann, you may have to correct me, but you can go to the website and there's a notification section and you click all the information you want to get notified on and you're done.
okay. And what about social media? Is there social media posts? that
So
are like-
we have a Facebook page, but we're not very active on Facebook because I don't have somebody to kind of monitor all of it. So,
I know that's social media is a full-time job.
yeah, and it takes a lot, so.
I think something as quick as a link on those notifications sounds like a great idea, so thanks for
Okay.
bringing that up. I think this speaks to, in general, a lack of local news sources, not just in Albany, but, across the country. And this is the kind of information that the public is losing out on when these sources go away. So I think that's just something to bring up.
Yeah, it makes sense that having once worked for long ago, far away for a weekly newspaper, the crime blotter was what they read, and we could now end up in a dynamic where the city and police put out more than they used to, and it's also less, sort of clearly obvious to people who aren't in those networks how to find it, right? As opposed to when they got the newspaper on their doorstep. So that's a hard one. I thought Commissioner Lee was going to suggest TikTok, but thankfully she saved us from that. You mentioned earlier in this report about, staffing challenges, and I wonder if there was anything you wanted to, you felt you could share with that on how staffing levels are right now.
Sure, so,
I think that's out of the,
Even if he mentioned it? Because I'm asking a follow-up piece,
May-
that it was a challenge because of
maybe
staffing.
at future agenda items, it might be good to talk about recruiting and retention strategies. As I'm sure you're all aware, that may be a really good topic for you to explore what other agencies are doing and what we're doing. So maybe that could be brought up then.
Okay, sounds like a future agenda item, but I would note I was only saying it because he said it. I asked a follow-up question to an informational report.
that could easily become a discussion.
Right. Okay, so are there anything else from the commission? Do we need to go to public comment on this, I believe? Okay, so public comment for agenda item 5.
Still no one in the council chambers. The online public is not raising any hands. So let's move on.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 6-1 is presentations and Racial and Identity Profiling Act, RIPA Stop Data Collection presentation.
Great. So thank you to the commissioners who came and did ride-alongs and took me up on the offer. The offer still stands to come out and do a ride-along and learn more about our department and how stop data gets collected, because it is extremely complex. How do I get my screen up there? Oh, am I not? I don't think I'm in Zoom.
Chief, I really did want to take a ride along, but I had ACL surgery a couple months ago, and I didn't want to get caught up in some crime situation and trip everybody up.
Well, and our front seats are a little confined with all the equipment, so you wouldn't be very comfortable. But once you're better, feel free. We're here, and I think it's really important, and I think it helps people understand that perspective of what is taking place and how we do our jobs. And you get to meet the people who are actually providing police services to your community. So, sorry about that. Ann? Okay, oh, so okay, great. Great, so RIPA, or the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, also commonly known as or referred to as STOP data, was established to come into law through AB 953. It went into effect in 2018, and it was a tiered reporting process where large agencies started off reporting, and then it eventually moved down to the smaller agencies. It is data that collects the perceived demographic and other detailed data regarding all stops or interactions that result in a search. And when they refer to the word perceived, it's the officer's perception at the time they see the person. So as an example, if an officer makes a traffic stop and they don't know the race or identity of the person, their perception starts the first time they see them. So it's not, and it's their perception, it's not what the person may identify as, it's the officer's perception, and we'll go through a list of the items. So anyway, next slide. These are the things that are not considered stop data, which would be like a mass evacuation, an active shooter situation where they've had to clear a building out of people and they've quarantined them in a safe area. Routine screening, let's say, a school had a school resource officer and people had to walk through a detector, or they were there screening people. That would not count as stop data, so that would not be data that's collected. Checking IDs to verify age, investigating underage drinking is not one, and DUI checkpoints are not stop data collectible. Next slide. A little bit of history on our police department as it goes with stop data. 2015, we explored collecting stop data as part of our strategic planning meetings, but that was not, through our community meetings, did not reach a high level, so it was not something we pursued at the time. In December of 2019, we started signing up our staff for training for the rollout of RIPA. January 2020, we had to get a quote from our vendor who does our computer automated dispatch system to start collecting the data and reporting it. March of 2020, I asked our staff to start working on our RIPA program and putting the framework in place. We had targeted starting to report January 1st of 2021, but due to some training issues and the complexities of getting all that done, we did not begin until February 2nd of 2021, and then we were required to start reporting data January 1st of 2022. We were a Tier 4 agency because we were a smaller agency. Next slide. So again, this is all the information that is collected from a stop or an interaction with somebody of the public. The originating agency identifier number, that's just how we get identified through the DOJ, the information's coming from our department. I'll just highlight a couple of the other things. We put the date and time is all tracked. Obviously, the perceived race or ethnicity of the person, gender, age, the reason for the stop is in there, the results of the stop, any actions taken, and then the officer is required to write a brief narrative as to why the stop or interaction took place, and the results of that interaction. We also document if there's force used, and then the actions taken during it. There is a separation of, if somebody's has a 5150 mental health hold, that's documented in there. And then we also document the type of stop, if it's a vehicle stop or bicycle stop or a pedestrian stop. So next slide. I will walk you through what the officers fill out every time they come in contact with somebody where the person is being detained, or if it's what we would call like a consensual encounter where the person's free to go, but then it converts into either a detention or there's a search done of somebody, they have to fill this form out. So they go to a call for service and detain a suspect. This gets filled out. They make a traffic stop. This information gets filled out. So this is an actual data entry. So as you'll see, this officer was assigned to patrol or traffic enforcement and field operations. The person in the upper right was a non-resident, so they did not live in Albany. They were stopped for a traffic violation. Next. The reason given the person was stopped was for a traffic moving violation. Type of stop is a vehicular stop, so the person was driving a vehicle. Next slide. This is the brief narrative. DOJ really wants this to be brief. We don't put any personal information in. There's no names, age, any of that stuff. It is just a quick narrative. So this person was stopped for failure to stop at a stop sign, which the violation type is a moving violation. The violation's listed at the bottom, which is failure to stop at a stop sign, and it lists the vehicle code. If you go back, sorry. We are required to make corrections. There was we try to catch corrections. There was a typo, traffic's misspelled, so our sergeants, we try to have them correct that. Next. Then at the top, you will see, this is a breakdown of the race or ethnicity. At the top, you'll see, of the top of the left gray box, you'll see race or ethnicity known prior to stop. If the officer knows the race before they make their stop, they check that box. If they don't, then that box does not get checked. Same with the box to the right that says gender known prior to stop. Then they put the perceived race, perceived gender on there, perceived sexual orientation, perceived disabilities, and then their perceived age. And next slide. Non-force actions taken, so there was none. None of those, I think it's 13 or so options. We didn't frisk the person, we didn't impound their vehicle. So those don't get checked, so that's a none. Force actions taken, none on that one. And then the result of the stop. So this person was given a verbal warning, and the verbal warning was for failure to stop at a stop sign. So what RIPA does not account for are repeat calls for service and encounters. And what I'm referring to that is those encounters, if we come across somebody multiple times, those still get counted as data, but they're not broken out in the data, right? You won't see that. We have some individuals that we have gotten 7 calls for service in one single day. All of those are data, but the data doesn't get broken down saying that was one person for multiple times. So it's a little difficult to drill down on the actual data. It also doesn't account for multiple individuals who are stopped. So if we stop, somebody who's stealing from a store and there's 4 or 5 people in the car, it doesn't isolate that one incident and say you had 4 people in that incident. It is all lumped together in all our data. And then it doesn't account for misperceptions. You're going off of an officer's perception, right? An officer could look at somebody and say, I think that person's 35 years old and they're really 50 years old. So it's not gonna, or they may believe they identify as a different race, and you're going off of the perception of the officer. Next. So this is our January 1st through 2023 through December 31st, 2023. That is our stop data. So it's broken down by race at the bottom. You can see the percentages going across the top of each column. Next slide. Then this is the affiliation of if somebody's a resident or non-resident, student, if the person's unhoused. That is our breakdown there. So you can see the majority of people we are coming in contact with are not Albany residents. And let's see, that is the stop violation type. So you'll see our moving violations is our, when we're looking at the traffic stops we make, moving violations, which tend to be our highest, is like, from my analysis, it looks like we tend to do a lot of stop sign violations, traffic light violations, cell phone violations, and speeding. Those tend to be our moving violations that we're dealing with. On the left, you'll see the equipment violations. Still they're a low percentage for us. Those would be like headlights out, a turn signal not working, a brake light not working, which those can be safety hazards, right? If somebody's driving at night and doesn't have the proper lighting equipment, that can be a hazard. And then we have 10%, which is our non-moving violations, which would be like your registration violation, so a little lower level. And then this is the breakdown of race known prior to stops. And next slide. These were some pictures we took just for those who maybe didn't get a chance to go on the ride along, and to kind of explain some of the challenges we have of sometimes we make, and to show it's not always easy to know who we are stopping or the identity of somebody until we get up on the vehicle. So as you can tell, this is an unsafe load or unsecured load, and there's no way of knowing who's driving that vehicle. Next slide. This is somebody making a red light violation, and it's hard to see with the glare of the windshield. Next. Another one where it's just a distance issue for no front, and that's a no front license plate. That vehicle has no front plate. Next slide. A stop sign violation, and again, hard to see because of the dark part of the vehicle. Can't see into the vehicle clearly. Next slide. Another one with glare from a side window, no license plate on that vehicle. And another no license plate, but difficult to see because of the glare on the windshield. That vehicle has tinted windows, and that vehicle, next one's fine. That vehicle has tinted windows. And then this vehicle, again, has tinted windows, so you don't know, who's driving it. Again, the glare, darkness in the vehicle. And then again, a glare from the glass. Tinted windows, again, tinted windows seem to be a little bit more increasing. And that does it for me. So are there any questions?
Yeah, just to start us off. First, thank you. Appreciate this data. Is this the slide deck going to be available? I don't think it was attached to the agenda, but and if so, where would we be able to find it or direct people?
It will be attached to the agenda under the stop data item.
Thank you. A couple of questions. I wonder if we could go back to the one that showed breakdown by racial characteristics. I think it was the second of the bar charts, if I remember right. Just wondered, I could use some help in, I appreciate there are, quite a number of categories. I guess it was the first, there we go. So on a really, I think I can guess, but on a really basic level, if you can just help us walk through which bar goes with which of the numbers.
So the 42% on the far right is white. Then the 1% is lined up with Pacific Islander. Native American is the next one. Middle Eastern is that next one. Then Hispanic is the 21%. Black is the 17%, and Asian is the 12%.
Thank you. A couple just follow-up questions on this. I assume this is of the 15% that perceived race is known, that this is the breakdown of that 15%.
This is all of our stop data. This is the 85% and the 15%. This is everybody we have stopped. So 85% of the time, that other chart is that our officers don't know the race before they've stopped the
Right.
person.
I guess, yes, I appreciate that, and that's very helpful. I'm asking, are the percentages here essentially the percentages of that other 15%? So that they,
100%.
yeah,
Just to clarify, I think this is 100% of the information, and then the 15, like, so this includes information that was recorded after the officer goes up to the
Yes,
vehicle.
yeah. This is all of our stop data. This includes our traffic stops, our pedestrian stops, our calls for service, arrests. This is all our data. So the 85, it's, of all of those, 85% of the time, we did not know the race of the person until we stopped them.
I see. But then, if you didn't know when you stopped, but then you did have a perception after the stop, it would go in here.
It goes in here.
That's great. That
So
is
as an
piece I was
example,
struggling with.
the first slide that shows the truck with the unsafe load,
Yes.
so that would be collected in here, and the officer, their perception would stop when they see the driver, when they walk up on the car and see the driver.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
That's helpful.
It's complex, and I'm not sure I covered everything too. This is kind of a good dialogue topic to talk about, but I think I covered the majority of it, hopefully well enough.
And then just a couple more factual ones, and then we'll turn over. On the statement about repeat calls and how they're logged. So if someone got 7 calls, they will appear 7 times in that data, or they'll appear?
They will appear 7 times in that data.
If they have 7 different stops, or even if there's 7 calls that lead to 1 stop?
If they have 7 different stops.
I see.
So
Okay.
we unfortunately have some individuals that we will engage with multiple times throughout the day, generated by calls for service. And they get put in there, and that's, you can't, this doesn't tell you that, right? This doesn't say you had one person who did this. You know, we had somebody we arrested for DUI twice in 3 days. That data's in there, but it doesn't tell you that, right? The data lacks, in my opinion, it lacks context, because it doesn't drill down to those subtleties when you're collecting data.
So similar to his question, I think you talked about it in the same sort of breath as if you have 7 calls for one person. But you also talked about if you stop a group of people. So that information goes down about what, the driver, I suppose, or
Everybody who would
or
be,
each individual person has a record.
each individual person
Okay.
gets put in there. So,
Okay.
now here's where it gets confusing. If we stop a car and there's 4 people involved and the drivers, we're stopping it for a simple traffic violation, those other people don't get documented in that, because they're while they're being stopped, they're not the issue, right? They may be free to leave. But let's say we stop a car that was involved in a road rage and there's 4 people in the car. We're going to detain all 4 to figure out what happened out. All 4 of those people will get documented in there.
And they'll have
But it won't tell you that 4 people were from one incident.
Right.
Or, you know, we go to a call at a business where somebody's stolen, and I'm sure if you watch organized retail theft, there's usually not just one person. Multiple people, that doesn't get flushed out in the data, so.
Yeah, it seems like a real flaw that the RIPA data doesn't account for when there are multiple people in the same car. I understand that there's some nuance that the data lacks. I'm interested in the mechanics of how this data is stored and gets reported to the state. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that happens at the end of a year, where all the year's data gets reported. I'm asking about this because I wonder if it is possible to, in a clear way on the website, have this data. I know that a couple other departments that I'm just aware of off the top of my head do release the RIPA data that they send to the state on their website. And I wonder if that's, I'm just interested in like the mechanics of.
Sure, sure. So the charts I walked you through, the officers fill those out and they go into our computer data system. And then they have to be reviewed by a sergeant for accuracy. And then once they're approved, they get sent off to DOJ. I think we're doing it every month, somewhere around there. So we try to push ours out, because if they have errors, then they send them back. They let us know, they notify us of the errors, and then we go back and correct them. So that information is pumped out on a pretty regular basis. And then as far as your other question was hosting. So our vendor who does our RIPA data, our CAD system, they're coming out with a dashboard later this year that would allow us to do that. So that's something I've already talked with them about. I heard there was an interest in it. So I reached out to them. It's something they're beta testing it now, and I believe it'll be out later this year.
That sounds really exciting.
Great.
Nice.
Questions or comments from other commissioners? Commissioner McQuaid?
It seems like it's hard to look at somebody and determine race or gender, or so many of these things. And it's a relatively new system. Do you foresee in the future a different way of doing this? Is there talk among county chiefs, state chiefs?
So we really don't have a say in it. There's the RIPA board that kind of dictates this. They make the changes. My understanding is I think there's one person from law enforcement that represents on the RIPA board, and they're the ones who make changes. There are changes happening already. We've already changed. I wouldn't say we've doubled the amount of information they're requiring us to do, but it's increased significantly. And their reports have changed. From their very first report is different than this report now. They've gotten rid of, they used to have a section in their new report that just came out. I will tell you it's 223 pages. I have perused it. I don't claim to know everything about it, but like I noticed, they got rid of a section that was called the Veil of Darkness, which was a comparison where you were looking at stops for disparity based on darkness, right? So if you had an increase in the daytime in a particular race and it decreased at nighttime, according to them, that's an indication there may be some bias. They got rid of that. And it seems like they don't have as much information on search results in there of a breakdown. So it is a new process. I think they're trying to find their way through it to get somewhere.
Do we, thank you. Is there a comparison in this, available in the system between perceived demographic category and then what the person reported? Because I believe, some of these things are reported on our state IDs, right?
Yeah, we don't ask
Yes.
race on, we don't ask that, and that's not part of what they do or we track.
Yes, but there's not a sort of follow-up about sort of how closely perceptions match people's self-reporting?
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's not part of the system. And I assume are all the categories at this point set by the RIPA board?
Yes.
The departments don't have individual
Yes.
discretion?
Yeah.
Other questions or comments from commissioners? Recognizing the limits of the data that you've described, what are, you think, the good utilizations it could be put to, right? So I certainly understand the point about not jumping to conclusions, or reading the data decontextualized. But what do you think the data is useful for?
So what I've found it useful for is because it is new and I want to pay attention to it and learn as much as I can about it. What I've found is it helps me understand where we're deploying our resources. So, and then kind of how that unfolds. I notice if we're spending more time on the west end of town, even just doing traffic stops, we're coming across a more diverse population than if we're on the east side. And so for me, that's what it's helped, right? I'm looking at where we're making our traffic stops. We get complaints about traffic throughout the city, but we definitely have some places where we get more complaints. So for me, it's helped me look at what we're doing and where we're doing it.
And then I think one could imagine a scenario where disparities existed in a certain jurisdiction and also the data itself, just abstractly saying, that the disparities existed and the data itself was unreliable. How do you suggest people navigate that condition? I definitely understand why you don't want to read decontextualized data as evidence. And also, contextualizing it doesn't inherently suggest that there's not a problem, right?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question the right way or cover it, but I think for me, what I also look at is you look at not only this data, but I think you look at the police department and you look at complaints, use of force situations, lawsuits. I think those all help paint that picture of what's going on within an organization. Does that kind of answer the question? Because the context really does matter. I mean, it's you experienced a ride along and saw it being done, and I'm assuming you thought it was okay. Everything went okay.
Yes, yes, very much so.
But when you look at those numbers, right? You stop an array of people, and contextually, that's what those numbers are, right? So it is kind of hard to pinpoint anything other than looking at it holistically of how a department's performing and what struggles they may have coming their direction when it comes to complaints and things like that.
And so for you, those would be standing from the outside, those would be the indicators that you would be most sensitive to.
Yeah.
Not just in your own department, but if you were asked to, how should someone in place X, understand it.
Yes, and I think also, again, there's a lot of trust that comes in, but you have to understand that sometimes, even with, when you're basing things off of complaints, complaints aren't necessarily always accurate at times. And so you do have to look at the whole picture, but from my perspective, those are things I look at. I would expect my sergeants to look at the data too. We discuss it at our staff meetings to see if there are trends, because if we are seeing something, we would want to cut it off or address it right away, whether it's training or an actual bias that somebody has. But it's one of those things you can't just look at the data and say there's a problem there. I think you have to look at it holistically. And again, people will call in, and if they're having a concern, they do call in, despite what other people may say. We do get calls if somebody has a concern. We'll hear about it at times.
Thank you, Commissioner Dupuy. Oh, I thought you were agreeing to. I apologize. Other questions or comments from commissioners? One minor one, just because I know especially some of the state and federal classifications don't consider Hispanic, Latina, Latinx as exclusive, right? So someone could be marked, perceived Hispanic and white or Hispanic and black. On this, is it an exclusive category? If somebody is marked Hispanic, that's the only thing they're marked?
So just as a reminder, this is the officer's perception.
That's correct.
So they're the ones making that decision.
But they can only mark one, is that right?
No, they can mark multiple.
I see.
So
They can
if
mark multiple.
they think somebody's maybe a mix of,
Sure.
they can mark multiple ones on that.
If they do, I know this is in the weeds, but if they mark someone as multiple identities, then that would appear in those numbers twice.
I don't know how that comes. That is one of the things we don't know the answer to, of how does that play out in the data?
Right. You report it, but
Yeah.
they decide how it gets
Yeah.
merged. Thank you.
If the stop results in an arrest, is that RIPA data included in the arrest report? So if somebody wanted to pull their own information, they got arrested, they wanted to see the police, or, the arrest report, would that be reported in there?
So the RIPA data would not be in the actual report, no, if I'm understanding your question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I guess if they could see, say their stop resulted in an arrest, and they wanted to pull their arrest report to see, okay, what was my perceived race, age, gender, sexual orientation by the police officer, that wouldn't be contained within the arrest report?
No, that information would not be in the report.
Okay. And in that RIPA information, is I don't know all your lingo, sorry, I'm struggling here. But I assume there's a report number or something when an arrest is filed. Is that correlated to a set of RIPA data or no?
So there's an incident number that gets created whenever we do something. That creates an incident number. That incident number gets associated with the RIPA data. So our system will generate the RIPA entry, so the officer will have to go in and fill it out. They'll tell dispatch, check it for RIPA. That incident gets checked in there. If there's a case pulled, you'll have to go to the case number, but the case number ties up with the incident number.
Okay, so it is all connected.
Yeah, we do have a way of tracking it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Were you about to reach Commissioner Lee?
Well, actually, it was just a question. I know Vice Chair Downs had asked this previously, but the slides, but I've lost the answer. The slides that the chief just presented, are those going to be attached to either the minutes or the agenda?
She said they're on the agenda.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Should we turn to public comment?
Yes, so still no members of the public other than fellow policemen. The online public, we do have a hand up. Sarah Yang, go ahead.
Okay, this is actually a comment from earlier, so I don't know how this would fit in the agenda, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to ask this. It doesn't have anything to do with RIPA data. It's just a comment about a community alert system, which I didn't really know where it would fit into the agenda. But when you guys were talking about the Albany Toyota incident, it reminded me that during that time, I work at UC Berkeley, and there's an emergency notification system that's called Warn Me that alerts employees and students of events, and that will basically take care of people living at University Village and other residents of Albany who work at Berkeley. But it occurred to me that during that incident, no one who was actually living in Albany was really getting updates. And I just wanted to kind of put this forward as something for the police department to maybe consider and look into to see if it's even practical to implement that. So that's all. And I'm sorry, this feels like it's out of left field. It's sort of, I was unable to get quickly to the button to raise my hand during the normal public announcements. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it appears there, I'll let you call it.
Yeah, no other hands are going up in the public.
Any final questions or comments from the commissioners? Here's not. Any final comment that the chief would like to make before we close this agenda item? Okay. All right, well, we really appreciate you being here and appreciate the chance to get information and the responses to questions. And know how busy people are, both work and otherwise, so we do very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, and I'll throw it out again. Please come do a ride-along so you can experience it and see some of the complexities live.
I want to make sure any RIPA data of mine says I'm 29 years old.
That's right. Go ahead, you were about to say something. I was going to move on to the next item unless you were about to.
No, I was just going to comment on it. I try to make myself available. Obviously, sometimes I can't be at the meetings, but I will say on the next topic, I was not reached out to from the subcommittee, and I think it may have been or may be helpful to have that because I think there's some information in there that may run afoul of the scope of the commission, run up against meet and confer issues, be just not legal to do. So I would just encourage you maybe to come talk with me, and I can get, we can have a discussion about it and provide the insight of what we've done and whatnot for dealing with investigations and maybe help provide some insight to it.
Okay, thank you, Chief. All right, so I think that closes item 6, and we on item 7, possible action on matters related. The first one is 7.1, subcommittee update. There's materials attached to that include at the start of recommendations, and then below some of the notes collected by different members of the subcommittee as, near the bottom of page 1 shifts to notes by different members of the subcommittee as we collected information. Does either Chair Johns or Commissioner Lee want to present it, since people are surely tired of my voice?
Could I ask a question before you start, with all due respect? Hearing the comments that we just heard that you didn't reach out to the police department, I would like to recommend that we postpone this item until the committee's had an opportunity to talk with the chief or anyone else in the department that's appropriate, so that we're getting information on what's already happening, what could be done, what does it. Looking at it, it seems to me it goes way out of the scope of what this commission's supposed to be doing. So I would really like to have you go back and meet with the chief and come back to us with a little more fleshed out recommendation, and that we don't discuss it tonight.
Sure, well, I think there are a couple of, at least one broad question that I think would be useful for us to discuss. I understand that some of the details still need to be worked out, but I know that as the subcommittee was talking, we had a couple broad questions that we wanted to bring to the full commission for discussion in front of the public. So it could be a more limited presentation, and we do understand that there are details that still need to be worked out. Does that make sense to you, Vice Chair Duns?
I wouldn't. Does anybody else want to be heard on the question of sort of tabling it entirely, or dealing with Commissioner Lee's suggestion of broad questions that can be taken back and incorporated after, at a future meeting and presentation?
I understand what Commissioner McQuaid is saying about maybe waiting, but I do think of this as like a first draft. So if there are things that you wanted to bring up that you wanted to have as a point of discussion in this, public forum, I think that's a good idea, so that when you do go back and have that discussion with the chief, you can bring back a more finalized product. I don't think it would hurt us to spend a couple minutes going over some points. I don't know.
I would like to add that my understanding of the subcommittee's initial report was one that would help spur additional conversation, which would then be refined for any actions taken, including discussion with the chief. So I understand it as something nowhere near complete, but just a starting off point for us to talk about it and to discover in the course of talking about it, okay, what other things would we like to know?
Seeing unless Commissioner Locke, do you want to be heard, or are you ready to move on?
I'm ready to proceed. It seems like item 7.1 constitutes an update on the progress of the subcommittee. I'm interested in hearing some insight into the particular process that was used. I do hear the concerns presented by Commissioner McQuaid and by the chief as well regarding a meaningful dialogue with the department. But seeing that the particular item is an update, I feel comfortable with proceeding.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to begin, Commissioner Lee, or Chair Johns, whichever?
Go ahead.
Sure. I think this is a question that Vice Chair Downs has brought up before prior, which is the question of what kind of experience we would like for a potential investigator to have. Just from our discussion, we found it very difficult to, in broad strokes, eliminate from, or recommend that we eliminate from consideration those with past law enforcement experience. Like, for one, the category of law enforcement is very broad. That could include, for example, prosecutors or DAs. Second, we find that an understanding of the particular culture and the ability to navigate city and police department bureaucracy are qualities that could be very useful. So that's a major consideration and a major discussion that occurred. And on this question, I think it would be very useful to hear what the rest of the commission believes on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Any commissioners want to be heard with either questions or thoughts on?
Well, I'm reviewing the notes you have here, and although I agree with some of your points, like of the areas to avoid, to the chief's point, I don't know if that's legal. I don't know. It would be, and you guys got some insight from some other neighboring municipalities, did you not? Can you share a little bit about what you discovered in that exercise?
Can I pass that to Chair?
The clearest was from Richmond. Now, they have a distinct, they're obviously a larger jurisdiction and have a different history in which they've had a prior iteration that got remade. And so they have full-time staffers who work for it, which is obviously quite a different model. But they did share with me some of their qualifications for some of their different titles. And so we did look at those as well as some of the information. You okay, Commissioner Lee? You need water? That some of the information by NACOL, the sort of a leading national organization on civilian oversight of law enforcement, so we did look at those, their categories in relation to the NACOL categories. Most of the NACOL also contemplates full-time permanent staffers, and so there are some inherent differences in that's going to create some differences, but those were the places. We also reached out to Berkeley, but didn't get the same level of information. And I think Chair Johns also reached out, but maybe not without results that we'd hope.
Yeah, I reached out to Burris's office and didn't get a whole lot of help other than the staffer that I was referred to volunteered to do the work or be added to any potential lists that we might have later on.
Could you clarify that? This was, I'm not sure I understood what you said. You talked to a staff person in John Burris's office?
Yes.
And they volunteered to do?
I laid out for them what we were looking for and that what our setup was. And his response was, if you need an investigator, that's something I can do. So
Okay. Thank you. I just didn't understand exactly what he was saying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Or she was saying, I don't know.
So, and I think that constitutes, in my memory, the sort of where we got, where we got direct information from.
Did you talk to any smaller cities that had perhaps a commission like ours and not an oversight committee, like Richmond, or I think what Berkeley and the Accountability Board? Did you? I mean, we're going sort of apples and bananas or something here. Maybe we at least need to be looking at commissions that are similar to ours.
Would El Cerrito have something? Would they be, I mean, they're a larger city, but I'm not sure they're large like Richmond large, where they would have a dedicated, I don't know. I wasn't on the subcommittee.
I don't know either. I wasn't on the subcommittee. I, at one point, have an Excel spreadsheet with both counties and what they have for commissions, but I don't have it with me.
The last I remember, having confidence in my knowledge, El Cerrito did not, right? And so one of the things that emerged in the public discussion of this was that many of the models are for larger places that do have full-time staff. And so, in this sense, the sort of consultant model is distinct, from those, right? And NACOL has lots of recommendations if you have full-time staff about how to think about their relationship to the department, et cetera. But they don't, but they're, yes, but most of the places that have this are larger than us.
So in a sense, we're sort of creating this from scratch.
Hopefully not totally, but
Okay.
it's
Some ways not.
So, subcommittee, did you have specific questions in your recommendation here that you wanted to bring to the full commission?
There was that issue of law enforcement experience that was simply a large portion of our discussion that I thought would be good to explain and also to open up to any further input. Yeah.
Well, I guess I've contended from the beginning that it's very hard, I think it's very difficult to advise what type of commissioner, what requirement or, qualifications we're looking for if we don't know what the issue is, because we may have different pieces of experience we're looking for depending on what the issue is. So in some ways, I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit. I feel fine with making like general recommendations, like, minimum education and things like that. But when we're getting into the weeds about whether or not they have law enforcement experience or whether they work for, they've been a public defender or a DA or whatever else, I think, a lot of that would be dependent on what, in fact, the issue is that a consultant is required for. If we're talking about a use of force issue, we're going to want somebody with different experience than if we're talking about, discrimination. Those are two separate issues, and they would require somebody with a different touch or a different experience, different background. So I don't know. That's my feeling on it.
Other commissioners?
Can the subcommittee speak towards their thinking, or speak on their thinking in the categories, the exclusionary categories of areas to avoid, and the motivation and thinking behind that?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
So
To give a little further texture to the areas to avoid, the exclusionary characteristics in your thinking, your notes here, captured on, I believe, page 2.
I think these were running notes as we went along that, we're sharing to show our experience. And so these were things that were suggested, by one, or more of the subcommittee members as we went along, as we were trying to do what Commissioner Lee has asked us to think through. How would we think through? So none of these were formulated as direct recommendations. But they were sort of in trying to understand the inherent tensions that have been mentioned between wanting someone who understands the work and also wanting someone who feels independent of the work, that these were some of the sort of brainstorming we were doing about how to think about, what would be ways of suggesting the independence of the consultant. But surely none of these are put forward as, ironed out or foolproof. So if there are ways of addressing that issue of how to balance, as Commissioner Lee said, essentially how to balance enough experience to be knowledgeable and enough independence to be credible. I think that's the difficult nub we were wrestling with. So we'd certainly be glad to hear from anybody on how they understand us managing that, how they understand ways of thinking about managing that tension.
Can I take a step back a little bit? There's a couple of things in here that kind of baffled me, but one of them, looking back at the resolution that council passed in 2021, which is Resolution 2021-100, it talks about this commission making recommendations to refer an incident to an outside consultant. And that would be reviewed by the city manager in consultation with the chief of police, the city attorney, and put before the city council. Nowhere does it say that this body sets up who the candidates are, hires the candidates, has anything to do with the consultant. They don't report to us. We don't write reports. They don't give us reports. So I'm confused as to how this fits the resolution that created the body. Could you address that?
I just see this work as being part of our broad mandate as an advisory body to the city council to provide, we don't pretend to be giving specific ironclad legal, making legal demands or setting policy. These would be recommendations to the city council as to considerations should the need arise for a consultant. I think it's important to note that these are recommendations and also that we're an advisory body to the city council.
And I think Commissioner McQuaid, it's an important question. I think it was part of our work plan, which I believe was, approved by council unanimously. The one-time action item on page 2 of our work plan is recommend to council desired qualifications and qualities of any potential consultant. And so in that context, it seems like this is a first step toward trying to complete the work plan that council authorized. Obviously, and any recommendation we would make to council would be purely a recommendation, and council could act on it, modify it, send it back to us revision, reject it and tell us to go away, right? And we also recognize beyond that the distinctions in, the council would be the one to approve an expenditure, and then presumably, as with other consultants, the management of a consultant would be done by staff. But I do feel charged to carry out the work plan item that council approved, lest at the end of our term, we're asked what happened to this, and the answer is we didn't fulfill what we told them to and what they, endorsed us doing.
So again, it would be interesting to hear from staff what the process is now.
Would staff be willing to speak, speaking more generally on the process for calls for consultants or requests for proposals?
Well, I'm not suggesting that they're prepared to do that
Sure.
at this moment, but again, it would be postponing it and having a fuller discussion.
Well, I think, you were about to say something, Luke. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, just, I was going to basically say what you guys just said, it's just that we'll take it under consideration and discuss amongst ourselves and have a better idea about exactly where the parameters are and stuff for the next meeting.
So, one thing we could do is the subcommittee could embrace, that role, as well as the role of contacting the chief about a meeting and seek to meet, both with the chief on perspective from his position and also with the staff on their perspective from their role in managing the variety of requests for proposals we send out. Sorry, Commissioner Dupuy, were you about to say something? Anything else that Commissioner Lee or Chair Johns want to put on the table about this as questions or areas for comment? Or are you feeling like you've got enough to move back to the subcommittee?
I have to say, listening to Commissioner McQuaid's question, it raised the specter for me of what's the point here? If we're still asking a question about what our underlying intent is, that seems to me to be a danger sign. I thought it was sort of clear that while we had no legal powers per se, that we would make recommendations, serious recommendations that the council would then take and vote on with our input and, I don't want to say direction, but some kind of suggestion. If we believe that we still don't have that kind of power and that we never had that kind of power, then I think we're in trouble.
I can add to that. It's the second clause of the resolution that establishes this policing commission. And that clause notes that the government of the city of Albany includes citizen advisory bodies appointed by the city council to recommend policies and practices in a wide range of areas, including parks, planning, transportation, and zoning. And whereas no advisory body currently exists pertaining to policing in Albany. To me, that means that this commission was established in the model of those other advisory bodies, meaning to recommend policies and practices. That is my understanding of the role of this commission. So I do believe, as Chair Johns was mentioning, that we have a role in recommending, not directing, but recommending policies and practices based on our understanding of the issues.
Yes, I agree. And to Chair John's point, this has been on an agenda item since the beginning about what constitutes qualifications for a potential consultant should we have to engage with one. And we developed the subcommittee. So, I appreciate what you three did, and you put a very, very extensive list of preferred qualifications together. And again, we don't understand all the particulars of that as far as that relates to the legalities of everything and how it relates to existing policies. So that's something we're going to have to, dive a little deeper on and make sure that we're all in alignment. But I don't think it's outside of our purview to have some general guidelines that we recommend as an advisory board to the city council. I mean, that's the point of your subcommittee. And again, I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions from the commission? Should we turn to public, members of the public?
Sure, yes. Still clear of members of the public in the room. We have a small group online. No hands are going up.
Okay,
We can move on.
thank you. All right, so that concludes, and subcommittee has their charge, and that concludes item 7-1. Item 7-2, I think, is a holdover from the last meeting. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, you
Good
too. Thank you
night.
for coming.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you. And this is, I think, a holdover from last meeting of election of chair and vice chair. And so I wonder, prior to this, if we could just get a reminder from city staff about how, term, which I believe does end in December, but also the process of handling if there are multiple nominations, of how the election will be handled if there are multiple nominations.
Right, so yeah, the term will go through the calendar year to the end of 2024. And the nomination process is you can nominate yourself or someone else. And then whoever gets nominated will go basically last person nominated gets voted on first and then work backwards. And once someone gets a majority of the commission's approval, then they're the ones who are nominated to be chair and vice chair.
The first person, if there are multiple, the first person to get a majority closes that portion of the election.
Correct.
And I believe I remember that we elect chair and then vice chair, so as to avoid. Okay, so we have opportunity for nominations for chair.
I nominate Member
I
Downs.
think I see Commissioner McQuaid, I'm sorry, and then I'll call on.
I think we're going down the same path, so why don't you go ahead?
I nominate Member Downs as chair.
I second that if it requires one.
Third that.
I was going to nominate Chair Johns, but, how about if I, withhold my response until, I would, happily nominate you to continue, especially since we didn't have a full term last year as we got started. So I would happily defer, ecstatically defer to Chair Johns if you wanted to continue. So how about, I'll nominate Chair Johns if Chair Johns.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Okay.
That's very flattering.
If that's the case, then, I, with disappointment, accept the nomination. Other nominations?
I nominate,
I think we're still on the chair.
oh,
Yeah, because it would need to be voted. But is there any other nomination for chair? Okay. Are you comfortable with moving to a vote? I recognize I'm in a funny position as I'm chairing this meeting, so I don't want to close the vote before.
I mean, if the commission has no more nominations to make, then let's do it.
Okay.
All right, so on the
Do
nomination.
we have to take public comment on this?
Not
I mean, do we have to, but is that the responsibility? Okay,
Okay.
all right.
All right, so on the nomination of Member Downs to be the chair for this term, let's take the vote. Member Downs,
I guess yes.
Member Dupuy,
Yes.
Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Johns,
yes.
Member Locke,
Yes.
Member McQuaid.
Yes.
Okay, so
Congratulations.
congratulations. No, I appreciate it. Nominations for vice chair, same election process that Luke described before. So who'd like to be recognized for nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Commissioner Locke.
I would respectfully decline the nomination.
I nominate Commissioner Dupuy.
Okay.
Okay, so we have one nomination on the floor. Is there what other nominations? Floor is open.
I nominate Member Lee.
Sure.
Okay. The only, I was thinking of that too, thinking highly of both of you. The only question I would raise is I fear that we are going to lose you before this term is over.
I do plan to continue over the summer, although
Okay.
whether or not I continue over the fall semester into December is a question.
Okay.
That has not yet been resolved, yeah.
I see. Okay, I didn't mean to make an assumption. That was,
No, I mean, that is a valid question because that's a question that's still up in the air,
right.
I will say.
Okay. And so, other nominations? Okay. So I think each of you have agreed to be put into nomination, is that right? Okay.
Actually, I will retract my,
Be careful,
give
Commissioner.
it to Commissioner Lee with the agreement that should she need to back out in the fall, I will gladly take your place.
I imagine that Ann is about to tell us that we would need to have a
Yes.
new election in that case, but, so as a point of, just general statement, I guess that's okay, but it doesn't obligate the
We'll bear that in mind,
commission.
but there will be a new election if needed. All right, so on the election of Member Lee as vice chair, let's take the vote. Member Downs,
Yes.
Member Dupuy,
Yes.
Member Lee,
Yes.
Member Johns,
Yes.
Member Locke. Yes. Member McQuaid.
Yes.
Very good. Congratulations, Vice Chair.
I told you about my many impending absences. No, I'm kidding. So that closes item 7.2, and we're now at item 8, which is future agenda items. And this is a space for commissioners to announce requests for future agenda items. I have a couple, but I'd prefer to hear from everyone else, from anyone, from others first. Commissioner McQuaid.
I think it was mentioned earlier to have an agenda item on recruitment and retention.
You don't need a second, but I second it anyway. I agree. I think then.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that will be dependent on the chief's ability to come back and speak to that or send somebody in his stead. And so I don't know if that will be able to be actually addressed, but I would love to see it on future agenda.
Yeah. Other suggestions by commissioners of future agenda items?
I think this was brought up in public comment, but the idea of a public notification system or some means of, something similar to the Warn Me or just exploring the idea. I think feasibility is also a discussion, but that may fall to a future meeting.
We do have Nixle and Everbridge, so it may be just an announcement, like how people access that.
This could be like a communication item, although I haven't heard of that, so I think communication is needed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually I would like to see that on the agenda too, and I know that I've pushed this a couple of times about being more proactive, because although the information is available, it does require the person to go out and find it, to go out and seek it on the heat map and all that. So I would like to discuss alternate means of getting the information out there to the public that's more pushed rather than them having to go find it.
So discussion of both sort of how the system, public notification system works, but also more generally how public interaction with bulletins and other forms of information or data are working. Okay, I have a couple. I think, I think we've mentioned before, and obviously the timing may be dependent on staffing, but I think a number of us have expressed interest in an update from the mobile crisis team as a future agenda item. The chief's comment suggested, potential staffing, issues. So we can understand that may be dependent there. And then I also would suggest that we ask staff to provide an overview of the city's overall budget process, since I think one of us is extremely familiar with it, but many of us are not. And since, engaging with council on that is one of the items, both in the work plan and the resolution, that just giving us information about the timeline of the city budget process, so that we can, understand as a commission, when and what kind of information we might be requesting in a way that'll be helpful to council rather than be off cycle of what they need. And then I would ask that we agendize a, further update from the subcommittee, which, depending on what happens in the next, 2 or 3 weeks could, it'll depend, how extensive that update is, depending on what happens in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But at least to include that as a item on the next agenda. And anything else that people would like to suggest as future agenda items? Okay. Do we need to, there's no public comment on this, I think, or there is no one waiting to publicly comment. Is that right? I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. Okay, so that concludes item 8. Does that give you enough information, Luke? Item 9 is informational. Our next meeting is April 18th, 2024.
Yes, and I wanted to mention, I will be traveling for work that week, and I actually have an evening event, so I won't even be available to get on Zoom. Will this serve as notice to you, or do I need to send you an email?
Send an email too, just
Okay.
for completion purposes.
And then as a question or a reminder, our quorum is 4, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of anything that would be added to the agenda, in terms of if there was a report from the subcommittee, the timing that you would want it in order to be able to add it with public notice to the staff would be?
About 10 days or so before the next meeting would be ideal. So the next meeting is April 18th. So about early week, the early part of the week before, so 8th, 9th, 10th at the latest, hopefully. So we need to get all that stuff publicly posted that week, so.
Also, the agenda comes out, the week before the meeting, and I will be traveling, like I said, but if there's something on the agenda that I would like to make comment on, could I send that in an email and have it read in the forum, or just put a pin in it until the next meeting?
You can send an email to the staff liaison, and then he can make that, with your consent, he can read your comment.
And that would be part of the public record, I believe, as would any comment, right? Just,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you know Commissioner Dupuy, but last, and I think I would also ask commissioners who did not receive the email of March 1 to just check your spam folders and let Luke know if it was there or if something is going awry. Is that
Right.
the
And if
right
you're
way to say
able
it?
to, tweak your email settings to clear emails from that address, that might make it easier for the future.
Great. That concludes item 9. Item 10 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
We don't need one. All right.
It's 8:58.
I was feeling the pressure of beating 9:00, but that makes it even simpler. Thank you all so much.
As usual, the next meeting is at 7 p.m., so.
Yes, that's right. I should have said that.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Ann.